And one last thing, baby. That chicken was dry. Real dry.
If you were to ask me now if I would be at all interested in watching a show about a middle school student as the local safety patrol officer in a 70s cop show parody-esque setting, I wouldn't necessarily jump at the chance to, but Disney's Fillmore showed me how much you can get out of a premise that on the surface level seems way too simple to hold any quality to it. In fact, the show played a huge factor into my fascination with other crime-related franchises such as Detective Conan, Professor Layton, etc. And from the very first episode I watched, I was hooked on not only its plots that were way more captivating than anything else that was on during that time, but also its characters that were allowed to grow far more organically than I was used to seeing. While in hindsight the show was very much grounded in parody and the characters were more sort of caricatures of other cop shows than meant to be taken 100% seriously, I didn't care about that as a kid. I wanted to solve mysteries, find out who the culprit was, and see if my absolute foolproof reasoning of "it can't be this one of these two suspects, so it has to be the other one" would serve me well. It usually didn't. The show never really got a fair shot in my opinion. Disney took a huge risk in getting it off the ground in the first place, since the premise is just super bizarre, but since they already established this in-universe backstory for all its inhabitants, I wish we would have gotten more out of it. The episodes that delved into Fillmore's past as a juvenile delinquent, or the enemies he met along the way, were some of the most fascinating and, while yes, probably not entirely plausible, just believable enough to turn him into somewhat of a troubled figure that struggled with finding a balance in moving forward with a new identity he created for himself and fending off the demons that continue to haunt him. And Ingrid was no different. Much like Fillmore, she herself used to be criminally motivated, but much more accepting of who she used to be and ready to move on with her life. Her genius nature was of great benefit in many cases, sure, but it also made her overthink a lot of her actions and made her feel left alone when nobody was there for her in this new environment. The show had a good balance going for it in giving us the occasional episode focused solely on Fillmore's backstory, and then one that is just them chasing after another criminal in school, or even ones that feature one of his old criminal buddies, and in this case, ex-lover. You may only remember the episode Immune to All But Justice, or heck, the entire show for that matter, for a little moment near the end, if at all, but I feel like this one in particular helps us to better understand how Disney's Fillmore handled a backstory way better than most other kids shows out at the time. As viewers of the show may be aware, every episode is constructed into 3 acts, the first of which takes us to the benefit auction by a couple pompous Canadian transfer students, where Fillmore happens to run into his old friend Penny. As it turns out, she was actually the one who organized the whole event, alongside her associate Winston Carter, voluntarily on top of that, very much unlike the Penny Fillmore used to know. Back then, the two of them used to get into all sorts of trouble, and seem to have been an absolute dream team. As they reminisce about old times, Ingrid chases after a suspicious individual that was rummaging through some of the items up for auction, who, as it turns out, is Winston's personal bodyguard. According to Penny though, Winston is to be trusted, and supposedly she never noticed anything out of the ordinary about his entire crew. He was also the one that got her back on the right side of the law, which is what the safety patrol did for Fillmore. And even though Ingrid isn't at all convinced of Winston's innocence, his status as a diplomat prevents safety patrol from going after him directly. They do, however, happen to come across a used bottle of ink inside the trash container near the auction, and as it turns out, exact match with a bunch of stolen baseball cards that were confiscated this morning. And after some further investigating into the situation, Penny informed them that Winston's bodyguard is about to receive a new shipment of his counterfeit cards in a park, but unfortunately they aren't able to get him in time. Fillmore starts to realize how much it is Penny is doing for him and tells her to stop putting her reputation at risk, but she stays committed to putting this case to rest, even going so far as to telling him where Winston is printing the cards. This was one step too far. Winston's goons detain Penny to prevent her from causing any more damage to the operation, while Fillmore and Ingrid happen to stumble across another important detail and finding out where the cards are being printed, leading them to the old swimming pool. Here, Ingrid and Fillmore put the whole operation to a grinding halt as they pour pool water all over the counterfeited baseball cards, while Penny is nowhere to be seen. In fact, a whole 4,000 remaining cards also seem to have magically disappeared. But as Fillmore pays Penny a visit at her house and he's trying to forget about the case, she accidentally calls the cards by the exact stash of players that was missing, thereby giving out the fact that she herself had been hiding them this whole time. So after all this time, all these investigations against her own colleague and false pretenses she had set for herself and trying to get along with Fillmore again, she just couldn't let go of her old ways and sacrificed their friendship in the process. She tries to convince Fillmore that she is trying to change her ways, that she will do better from now on, and that this shouldn't destroy the friendship they just rekindled, but Fillmore can smell the trouble from a mile away. And so he decides to tell it how it is, that he won't fall back into old habits, that he moved on from this life and won't let her, a person that he hasn't seen or heard from in so long, turn him into something he doesn't want to be anymore. And more importantly, he won't sugarcoat anything for her sake and tell us how it is. The chicken was dry. The relationship they may have had at once is overcooked. It's done. Over. They went separate ways, and though they might both want things to be differently, there is no point in them pretending like things are the way they were, cause that's just not how life works. This moment is so incredibly powerful and tells us a lot about what kind of person Fillmore is, one that always tries to believe there is hope for someone to have redeemed himself and the good in people in general. It also never lets a false sense of reality get the best of him. I remember as a kid feeling somewhat bad for Penny. In the end, she genuinely feels like she was trying to make that thing the two of them had for each other work again, but couldn't help falling into old habits. These aren't necessarily tears of disappointment at first. These are tears of a girl still living in that alternate reality where things haven't changed between the two of them and they still go around town causing trouble and mayhem. While this is one of the primary examples I bring up when talking about why I love the storytelling in Fillmore so much, there are other examples that are just as powerful. Like the one where Fillmore visits his old partner's school during the holidays. Wayne was the one that got Fillmore into the security team in the first place, but now that Wayne's old partner Emily got forced to resign from the force due to the school's strict guidelines, he is too afraid to make even just one move without feeling controlled. They only end up solving the case thanks to Fillmore's persistence in convincing Wayne that he doesn't have to be chained down by the shackles of this flawed system, even taking some of the other oppressed members along with him. Should Disney ever decide to re-air some episodes of the show more prominently or grant it a proper release, I invite you to look out for some of these elements in its storytelling you may have missed when you were a kid. Or if you're too young to know about the show, give it a shot, cause you may end up liking it. Its style may be somewhat polarizing and some of the characters I could have done without, but as far as Disney's more serene and composed shows go, this is up there with the best.